But just want to introduce, so our first panelist here to my right was drafted yesterday, which is very exciting. So Ayomi Wolf is a student at Wilson High School here in DC. And her principal was actually supposed to be a panelist and had to be called away because she had to, had something else she had to take care of or do. And so can you imagine being a student and your principal's like, yeah, I can't do this panel at this Big Ideas Fest, so you go do it. So that gives you an idea. Just incredible. She's a junior. And also, like you told me yesterday, you do theater, right? So I think we're going to hear some great stuff and real insight from her. Because you imagine if your principal says, yes, come up and do it, she's got some stuff she's going to bring us. Next we have, Barbara Illowsky, who is another Californian. She's a professor of mathematics and statistics at Anza Community College in Cupertino, right? Yes, okay, I got that right. It's interesting because I was that college student who never had the money for the textbooks, and I was always going to the library to check things out, for like the 2 hours or whatever and read them. But she actually created the first open education resources textbook for statistics, which is huge. So that means that students, if you don't have that money, then you can just have the book online or in whatever format and then read it. So you don't have to be trapped in the library all the time. Not that that's a bad thing. Next, we have Tamir Harper, who is a student here at American, correct? You're a freshman? Freshman. Who, again, when I was reading his bio, I felt like, gosh, what was I doing at like 17 and 18? When he was a 17, when you were a senior, you founded sophomore. Okay, sophomore. See, let me back it up down even more. Founded UrbEd, Inc., which is a Students for Students organization that is really advocating for there to be high quality teaching and learning for students in urban areas. And then next we have Sara Layton, who's right next there. Hi. She is from Utah. She is an English language arts teacher at Mountain Heights Academy, which is a virtual high school, right? And you all use 90% OER? About that, yeah. And then we have our two amazing facilitators over here. So Nicole Tucker Smith, who is the co-founder of Lessoncast, which does customized teacher learning. And then also our fearless leader, Lisa Petrides from ISKME. So I'll let them go ahead and take it away.
Great, good morning. So how we're going to start is each of our panelists, and we're going to start with you, Sara, and just move down, are going to just talk for like 5 to 7 minutes. And they're going to, this panel is about exploring barriers to access. So they're going to tell us their stories around how they have encountered or moments of inspiration in their work around addressing barriers to access, whether it's their own barriers that they were encountering or what they were trying to do for others. And after that, we're going to then just prompt them for some questions to kind of hear deeper about their stories, to hear some of their challenges. So this is not about like painting a perfect picture of what something really good looked like. It's actually the opposite. It's actually so you understand the process of what were those challenges they encountered and what they've been working on and what some of those barriers even still are in some cases. So yeah, so we'll just go, and if you need a little time, I'll kind of give you a little I'll give you a little nod. No hooks at Big Ideas Fest. And yeah, so please, Sara.
Great. Thanks. Yes, thanks for the introduction. I'm an English teacher at Mountain Heights Academy. We're an all-online high school. We're a public charter school in the state of Utah. So it's free online education for anyone that has a Utah resident. And if you picture the state of Utah, we're a large state. We have urban areas. We have isolated small communities, but anyone with a resident can come to our school. They come to orientation, they pick up a laptop, a few supplies like art kits or science kits, a couple of hard copies of novels, but mostly everything is online and open, no textbooks. So they have what they need with their laptop, and then they go home to their homes, wherever they are, and do school from there. So it's kind of a unique population. We I really related to the speaker last night, Sara, the keynote speaker, talking about how these college students are forced to grow up so quickly. I feel like that is happening to some of our students that are seniors. I teach mostly seniors, that they're faced with a lot of these adult challenges at such a young age, and the online school is an option for them because they're kind of forced into it sometimes. When I first started at the school, it was almost 10 years ago. I came in the second year. My expectation and our school's expectation is that we would attract really goal-oriented, talented kids, high achievers that wanted to use the flexibility of an online school to pursue their other talents or to graduate early and to move on with their lives. And that, in some cases, is who we have. We have a lot of high achievers and really talented kids in the Olympics, a girl that was on The Voice. We have dancers that are studying in London and New York City and LA. We have athletes and like a professional skateboarder. We have lots of those talented students, but that's not, I guess to our surprise, that's not mostly who we have. We have a lot of kids struggling with lots of adult issues in their lives. We have students, like I teach seniors, some parents will say, you're 18, you're on your own. So you go get a full-time job, pay rent, and do your school at night when you have time. This is a full load of school, trying to graduate from high school, working full-time. We have parents that say, oh, free babysitting. You stay home and take care of your siblings and do school sometime in between, changing diapers while we go to work full-time. And some of our students just live in really hard situations with family trauma, divorce, parents living in two different places, so they're traveling in between. I have a student here in Maryland, just moved here with his mom that just got divorced. So we contact these students, video chat, and I can see into their homes a lot of times. And instead of them coming to me, I can see these situations and hear the background noise, the violence, the profanity from parents. It's very tragic sometimes. And then also a population that we have that's growing exponentially each year is our students with learning disabilities, with IEPs, we have our autistic kids, we have students with physical challenges where living at home is just a good solution for them. Students with cancer, kidney failure, brain tumors, we deal with a lot of issues at our school. And our Uber driver, when we were coming from my colleagues are here too, it's like, online school, how do you replicate the social experience for them? And of course we have in-person activities and service learning opportunities, but a lot of times we are the social life, the teachers, we are their resource. Sometimes the only people positive that they talk to in the day. So anyway, that's our challenge with online learning, but then on top of that, our school has the added challenge of being founded on the principles of open educational resources. So our founder, Anna Dare, said we will be the first high school to use primarily open educational resources. So our teachers are asked to build their own curriculum or find quality OER, and then we release those courses for free. So we have all of these challenges, and I was tasked, I'm an English teacher, but I was also given the task to lead a PLC to train teachers on how to access open educational resources and how to publish their own. Because we have lots of good OER for core subjects, but not a lot of OER for PE and health and computer science and ukulele. We have a ukulele class. And so that was my challenge. And also a point of epiphany for me was, why don't we get our students involved they come to our school because they kind of want to be isolated, they think. We have also a lot of very sad students with mental illness, with depression, anxiety, that have been pushed out of their local schools. How to get them involved. And I guess what I've done is ask the students to start publishing their own resources. And that has become a more meaningful assignment for them when they see that what they do in our classes lives beyond turning an assignment and getting a grade. And just one quick example that came out of the work that I've done with getting students involved is I had an autistic kid, Caleb. I would see him on video chat. We were learning Shakespeare. He couldn't relate. I didn't think he could relate to Shakespeare. When I would try to talk to him, he wouldn't look at me in the eye. He would look to the side, have his mom answer sometimes. But I gave him the option of creating a project that was of interest to him, and he is an actor. I didn't know this. He can't speak to me face to face, but he can act. So he created this video where he was like a news broadcaster that introduced Shakespeare, and then he played all of the characters. He put on a hat, he was Shylock and spoke with like a Jewish accent. Then he put on another hat and he spoke in a Scottish accent. And he became the shining star in our class through this assignment, and then he published that, and future students are able to use the resource that he created to help them understand Shakespeare. And as an added bonus, sometimes our teachers feel isolated too in an online community because we work from home and we don't see each other in a building. And the teachers that got involved in publishing their own online resources also felt more of a sense of community as their resources were being used by other teachers around the nation and the world. So that's my experience.
Good morning. All right, I'm from Philadelphia, so we're going to try that one more time. Good morning. Good morning. All right, so my name is Tamir Harper, and I am a first-year student at American University studying secondary education and communications, but originally I am from Southwest Philadelphia. Any Philadelphia folks in the house? Oh, man, that hurt my feelings. All right, so as stated, I'm the co-founder and current executive director of an education nonprofit in Philadelphia that advocates for quality and efficient urban education. But that came about only because I am a product of the broken system. And what I mean by that is I am a graduate of the school district of Philadelphia, where I went to some of the best and worst schools in the system. But I call it broken because it was determined by my zip code, the quality of education that I received. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. I went to elementary school in about 3 blocks away, Morton Elementary, and then I went to Tilton Middle School about 4 blocks away, which was rated one of the worst middle schools in the city of Philadelphia at the time. My parents did not go to college, but they always said our kids are going to go to college and figure out a way to be successful while in the hood. So they wanted to figure out how we could be successful while in the hood. And they knew the only way to do that at that time was to go to school. So they made me travel about 20 minutes to another part of the city called South Philadelphia on a G bus every morning, rain, snow. My mom didn't care. She didn't believe in missing school unless you were sick. And if you were sick, you need to go and get the nurse to call me and tell me that you're really sick. So I went there for 2 years and then applied to the Science Leadership Academy. And later on, you guys are going to hear from Joshua Block, who I don't think is here yet, but he was actually one of my teachers. And I didn't get into SLA at first. And SLA is the abbreviation for Science Leadership Academy. I didn't get in there at first, and I was heartbroken. I cried for 2 days. My mom is like, boy, you got other options. Stop crying. Get your life together. Come on. But I wanted to go to Science Leadership Academy because it's a project-based one-on-one inquiry school, meaning I got a laptop. I was able to ask whatever questions I wanted, and I was able to use what I was learning in real life. I was able to make projects, and that made me co-found a nonprofit from the learning opportunities. But my 9th grade year, I walked in and went into this classroom on the 3rd floor. And this building is not the biggest, but I get lost very easily. And I walked in to this room that was bright with bright colors and like 3 couches in the back sitting on the wall. And I'm like, what is this? This is not a classroom. Why do we have couches in this room? And I sat there for a minute and I found one of my friends from my neighborhood that also got accepted. And this guy, and he will tell you, he has an odd shaped head. His head is pretty big, he says. And he came in, bald head guy, and said, hey, my name is Matt K. I was like, whoa. we got a brother teaching. I had a black male educator in front of me. And ever since then, my perspective on education kind of changed. And that feeling of having that black male educator, one, I always went back and forth of being an educator. Can I be an educator? No, I shouldn't be an educator. To be frank, my mom wants a Porsche. And I said, if I'm a teacher for 4 years, I can't go buy her that Porsche. That's not going to happen. And I went in there and he was just like the coolest, down-the-earth guy, and put it in perspective for us of like, I'm not making 6 figures yet, but trust me, it's in the pipeline. And said, well, when we talked about race, when the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, he gave us the history of that, but also told every black person in the room, you do not have to be the black spokesperson. And for the first time, I actually felt that. For the first time, when a black male sat in front of me and said, one, you can be an educator and be close to making 6 figures, and there's other ways to getting money as an educator. But two, as an educator, you say, I don't have to be the black spokesperson for my race. My father always told me that, but my father's not an educator. He's not in the classrooms that I'm in. So having that black male educator in front of me telling me, bro, you don't have to be that spokesperson for your race when we're talking about slavery, when we're talking about police brutality, when we talk about the miseducation of the Negro, you don't have to be that person justifying and saying Black Lives Matter every time, because there's an army and I'm already here to tell them for you. So that feeling of having that black male educator also made me say, well, why not go one step forward and go study education and see how to disrupt the system inside and really figure out how to reconstruct the system, not even deconstruct, reconstruct. Because the system works in certain areas, but how do we reconstruct it to work for every student? And how do we recruit black male educators? So the challenge, and I'll be really quick, is education isn't sexy. And I'm writing a 12-page paper on that for writing. Education isn't sexy for black males because of the perception that they receive. So Matt K will tell you this was not always the first choice, but his mother was an educator. And second, we can't recruit and retain black male educators because black males, or actually everyone, usually go where they see themselves in. So if I never see a black male educator, I'm never going to be a black male educator. And the final is that when we have these black male educators, I'm lucky that he was the only actual black male educator that stayed in a classroom, is they're moved out of those roles into disciplinary roles. But this man stayed in a classroom. I had him freshman, sophomore, and he's still teaching and is an author, but still continues to instill being a black male educator into his students. So those are the challenges. I'm a product of the broken system, and I didn't have my first black male educator until 9th grade.
Morning, everybody. I'm Barbara Illowsky, and I actually lived in West Philly during the, you weren't even born. I don't know if your parents were born during the move bombing with Mayor Good, and that was quite an odd time to be in West Philly and a dangerous time, and took the L to get to school every day. So I'm here. Lisa asked me to come to talk a little bit about open education resources, and I'll just give you a little history. I'm originally from the East Coast, and Liz was so right on. I grew up in New England, and West was New York, and then we knew Chicago was in there, and then there was California and some states above it. And that's sort of the view of this. And it wasn't until I moved to California over almost 35 years ago that I thought, I know there are all those I states together and the W's, and I got to figure out where all this stuff goes. I think I got it now on here. Amy said something that just struck to me. I teach mathematics and statistics at community college. My undergraduate degree is mathematics. My master's degree is statistics, PhD in education. And I thought it was only us math teachers that get, when am I ever going to use this stuff? I can't believe that for a yoga position, somebody would be saying, I don't want to learn this position because when will I ever use it? So I was so excited to have somebody else have that, and for you to say, well, you don't know when you're going to use it, but it may come up at some point. Sara really struck me last night because my entrance into OER, which is open educational resources, was as a social justice issue. There was a recent report that came out and this past year about the out-of-pocket expenses for college. So once you get past the tuition, students have an expense of about $19,000 per year. And in California and around the country, community colleges are very low cost. I'm so thrilled with the College Promise program right now that's going on, but many states had some form of it already. Either we had BOG waivers, Board of Governor waivers, there were certain parts to it. But with $19,000 out of cost and getting money and still having to use it to pay to take your parents to the doctors or your grandparents somewhere or contributing to rent at home, having to spend all this money on a textbook is really out of the question for so many people. And what I really thought of this as, I was teaching mostly statistics, but also other disciplines in mathematics. And I thought about my students who would come, and some would have the textbook and some didn't have the textbook. And my colleague and I authored one so that it could be the lowest cost textbook, and it was in the early 1990s. There were a whole bunch of other reasons that we authored it, one being that we started looking, this is when multiculturalism and diversity was starting to become important in education, and the way that the math books were created was that you would have Jose pumping gas and Maria cleaning houses, and that was the type of multiculturalism that was in the books, and that was not what I was interested in. I was interested in math around the world and different cultures and bringing that in. So we had this textbook, and it was for collaborative group work together. And then it was the lowest cost, but what I noticed in many of my math classes where I used a commercial textbook was that, in my other classes, was that the students might not be sharing it, might be going to the library, taking it out on a 2-hour reserve, borrowing it overnight. One of my mentors, Hal Plotkin, talks about he would buy his book from the bookstore and then return it the day before the no returns, and then go back in the next day, buy it again, and get a 7-day return period on this. This is not a way to learn. It's not a way to live. So I thought about, what could I control? I'm a community college math faculty. That is, aside from the dean, it's the lowest no power position. The only thing we get to do is decide what textbook to use. That's it for our class. I knew that I could not control the rent. I knew that I could not control outside influences such as childcare, where students live, what they were having. But what I did know is I could control, once they got into my classroom, I could make it so that everybody had a footing where they could succeed in class. This is sort of my epiphany, is that actually there's something I could do. I can't fix the system. I'm just one, well, not little, but one minor community college math faculty. So I started putting the book on DVDs. This was sort of pre-widespread internet. Some people had the internet, and we had it on the PDFs on DVDs, and I just went to Costco, and I thought I could buy a stack of 100 DVDs. Students could make copies. They could bring it to the media center if they didn't have a computer. And then the OER movement started in, and I was so fortunate that my then college president and chancellor dragged me. She said, I want you to come to Rice University, and when your president talks to you as just like, wow, I'm one of 1,000 faculty here, and she calls me up and says, I want you to come and I'm paying your trip. I'm like, yes, I'm coming, please take me. So we ended up in a project. Hewlett Foundation funded a project that took the textbook, the statistics textbook, which was being used at about 5 colleges at the time, and Rice University made it ADA, American Disabilities Act compliant. This was before WCAG 2.0. It was about 2005, 2006. And they used it, they call it a prototype, and I guess that's what you would use for design thinking. I called it a guinea pig because we had no idea what was going on, and made this book one of the first open ed resource full textbooks for college. And immediately several things happened. One is my students who did have computers or could go to the library or could go to some other place, they could use the book online. And what I started to realize was the learning was better. It became a better learning model because you could hover over the hyperlinks and glossaries would pop up. ISKME did a study of my students. My biggest concern was I don't want to ruin anything. I want to make sure that the students coming out of my class have as strong an education so that they can succeed in their next level classes. And I don't know if you know this, but right now at colleges around the country, if students were to buy their books, it would cost them about $1,200 to $1,500 a year. And that's one thing when you have, Sara mentioned Harvard being taught, and you have parents paying or financial aid covering $65,000 a year, $1,200, yeah, that's a pain, but that's not, I don't get to eat today. When you have community college students putting themselves back to school where they're running their entire lives and doing everything else, they get a free tuition waiver. Oh, is that my time? Okay. And so I'll just say that for me, what was really important was that I could make a difference so that these students all had access in my class. And I could also want to make sure that it was covering accessibility. There wasn't WCAG 2.0 at that point, but American Disability Act, so that the blind readers could read it, because it wasn't just an affluence issue, it was also a learning disabilities and a style for how students could read. So that's how I got started, and you'll hear more later. Thanks, Lisa.
Hi, I'm Ayomi. I actually am a junior at Wilson, which is the school right up the street. That's my third year there, so started in freshman year. It was a pretty new experience for me. I had just been coming from 7 years of private school, 2 years of homeschooling, so complete shockwave of 1,900 kids. I was pretty used to a homogeneous environment, so I was like, this is completely new for me, and I fell in love with it. I love my school, but I started to notice there was a lot of equity problems there when it comes to like the AP and honors classes. So when I was first picking in 9th grade my biology class, there's an option between honors and regulars. And I thought I couldn't possibly, take an honors class. So I took the regular class. I showed up the first day, and it was about 11 students, 9% people of color, and no one in that class took it seriously. It was like, oh, it's a regulars class. I couldn't possibly be in honors. This is just a simple class. It's not hard. I'm not smart enough for honors. And so I was talking to some of my friends who were in the honors classes, me feeling slightly ashamed, like this is a class that people don't take seriously. And the honors classes were actually the exact same curriculum, exact same course, same tests, same knowledge being learned in the honors classes. But instead, something that I didn't know was that honors kids got a GPA boost. They got a little head up in their GPA, while regulars kids didn't. And there was this perception that regulars classes were, for the stupid kids, and not just the stupid kids, but also Black kids, that honors classes were predominantly white, and the regulars classes were predominantly Black, and they were meant to stay there. And me sitting in my AP classes and my honors classes now and last year, the sense of I have to try harder because, I have to prove myself because I'm, one of 6 Black girls in this class out of a class of 33, and I'm struggling, and I got to make sure I got to prove myself, but also not step on anybody's toes. This is a class meant for the white kids. I can't be too bold, too smart with myself because this is not my class. I'm supposed to be in those, those other classes. And there's this perception in schools, a societal problem that seeps into our schools, that intelligence is equated with white people, that white is intelligence and Black is stupidity, and that, they couldn't possibly belong in those honors classes, those AP classes, challenging themselves, pushing themselves because, it's a white class. It's meant for white kids. And I felt that in my classes, and I felt that, and I saw that in my school, that there was an equity problem, that the school is very diverse, but the classes that are supposed to be meant to push people, supposed to be for higher learning, weren't showing that. They were majority white. and my school was not majority white. And so there was a huge problem there. And so I started joining lots of different clubs and communities. I joined the diversity task force, which is a group of people that helps, implement diversity programs in my school, doing lots of clubs like Common Ground. And also now I'm helping, make my theater community. A huge part of my community is the theater program, helping them make that more diverse, because that's a huge problem. That's a huge thing that represents our school as a theater. And, there's just major inequity to that. And so the diversity task force, which I'm a part of, then implemented last year this thing called Honors for All. And Honors for All was that when the freshmen came in, you were automatically put in an honors class. There was no regulars class for honors biology and honors English. And that was meant to change the perception, change the perspective that there's a stigma about Black intelligence and Black excellence, and that once you put everybody at that high standard, at that honor standard, everyone's then expected, even the Black kids are expected to be, at that level. That it's no longer just the white kids, it's not just a white class. It's now a class for everybody. Of course, there was pushback. A lot of white parents still now complain like, oh, my kid's not getting the full education. No, they are. It's just you are no longer at that status that you were at before. That there's a sense of status and privilege that, oh, I've always been at these classes. My kids have always been in honors classes, always been in AP classes. And now it's being filled with Black kids. Like, I'm worried for my kids' education. It's not that like that anymore. Like, it can't be like that, because there can't be that perception that Black kids aren't intelligent. They most certainly are. They haven't been given the opportunity. And so now when I sit in my class, I know that their kids, of course, Honors for All didn't apply to my grade, but the grade below me and the grade below that, is that when they sit in their classes, they can feel accepted, that the acceptance that I don't really feel in my AP classes and my honors classes, because I'm, one of 5 out of 30, that they can feel that acceptance, they can feel that privilege of being in that class, and they can get that honors and AP boost for their GPA, that they're not stuck in the regular classes, the Black classes, they're not stuck in those classes that don't push them and other people don't see them. There's a stigma that those classes, are for, those kids, and that they could never push themselves, never be in those classes and do well and succeed. And so my school isn't trying to implement that, as well as doing AP for All, that when you're a sophomore, you can take AP World, so that when you are in those honors classes in 9th grade, you feel compelled, like, I could do this, I can do this. This is no longer just a white class. This is not just a class for not my friends and people I don't know, I don't feel comfortable with, that I can push myself and take an AP class, take the AP test, get a 4 or 5, and feel good about myself, about the knowledge that I'm gaining, that I deserve, that the kids who look like me, Black young girls and boys, can feel like they're accepted and they're worth the knowledge that are in honors classes, worth the knowledge that's in an AP class. And so the point for Honors for All is just to make that safe space for kids so that everyone can get that kind of education and everyone can feel worthy of the knowledge of an AP's and honors class.
So thank you for everybody on this panel, for one, being willing to share your story so openly, so honestly. And really our first question, our probing question for you, is that you each described challenges, barriers that you saw within your context. And there are other people living in your world, in your context, who may not have seen those same experiences as problems or as barriers. So what do you think was it about you and what you brought to your situation, or just what was present for you, that really brought those barriers into vision and then inspired you to act on them? And that can be for anybody in the panel. I believe in wait time for things.
All right. I will start. I told you how the textbook was one of the first open ed resources, and I started to become open textbooks, not first OER. I started to become an activist based on this. I was invited to help with some Senate bills from our legislature in California and to help assist in writing some that resulted in funding for OER. And then I got to meet wonderful people from around the country, like Ethan and other people, and Lisa, who really took me on a different path. But you were asking about the challenges that so the challenge is that when you're in the beginning of doing something, here was the big question I would get often. So your book is free, you know, you get what you pay for. How do you know yours is the best book around? And I was just like, yeah, it's not. I'm not going to say it's the best book around, but I think what's best is subjective. And so when I am looking at 2/3 of the students, which is a national statistic from the Student PIRG publication, of 2/3 of the students who are not buying a textbook. And yet in my class, everybody has the access to education. I think this goes right into what you have, because who's not buying it? The people who are lower income. And typically, who were many of the students who were lower income? They're either coming from immigrant families, or we have a large Hispanic population, a Black population, and it's the students who are struggling just to be in college already. And so I would say, well, I don't know if it is or it isn't, but here's what I do know. Rice University published it, so it can't really be terrible on there. And what I also know is that when my students go into their next level statistics course, so a psych stats or a business stats, and I'm contacting them, I'm finding out that they're really well prepared. So if they're really well prepared, and now, I don't know the exact numbers now, the last I heard was over 600 colleges and universities in the US are using the textbook. So at this point, I have to think I'm not destroying freshman statistics, right? So I must be helping students to get through. But that was a big challenge, that imposter feeling of there are always better statisticians out there than me who have the books, even though I really disliked the books. But this feeling of, I want to make sure everybody has access.
Yeah, I really related to the student here. What's her name? Sorry. Ayomi. With the feeling that students are underestimated sometimes, and that if you give them a chance to shine, that they will. And I think that happens in our school with an online school. Sometimes we feel like it's an alternative school, or these students aren't as smart or capable sometimes because they have switched over and chosen this school. But when you provide students with opportunities to shine and to show what they're interested in, and to create something, I don't know, based on their own experiences, based on their own talents, even if they struggle in other areas, there's something that can help them shine. And doing projects based on student-based projects, student learning, individualized projects like that was really an eye-opener for me to see. They may struggle with grammar or writing, but they are an amazing artist. And if you give them a chance to do that and publish it for the world to see, you can come up with some really amazing things. So, and then as an educator myself, there is always that feeling of insecurity publishing your own work too, because everyone's going to see this and judge it. And that was a barrier too. But knowing that it can be revised and reworked, and we're all in this together as educators, that has really helped me be able to publish my own stuff. So, yeah.
Anybody else? Or I'll ask another question. Okay. Do you want to talk, or I'll ask another question? Okay. Well, I want to kind of follow on your question around sort of, kind of why, why were you able to move forward on this and maybe somebody else didn't, a colleague? So I'm kind of, I'd like to really understand, like, what do you think about your experience? What was it that that made you say, I'm going to do this in this way? Do you have a sense of what that is?
Yeah, well, I had never really, being in like a majority private, private education all my life, I had never really seen that problem before. I had been with mostly white kids. I live in an affluent neighborhood, and I've never really seen that problem with race, because I never, no one, I was like, I don't see color, I don't see you as my Black friend. Like that's always the perception that was in like my private schools. And so I never saw that until I came to a public school and realized there are problems in education and inequity, and there are problems with how kids learn and who learns more and who learns less. And so that was an eye-opener for me, like being in a school with so many kids and so many different types of kids and people. I realized that there's the education that I grew up with is just not the same that other people get and that people deserve. And so I wanted to be a part of a process that helped give those opportunities to other kids. And of course, my principal and the diversity task force was able to come up with the idea for Honors for All. And of course, and from that, other programs have started. The thing with the theater thing that I'm doing is based off of making sure there's equity in other places, not just in the classroom, but out extracurriculars, because our school is so big, there's so many different opportunities. And if kids are not feeling welcome in the classroom, they need to find another outlet and feel welcome in other places. And so seeing those problems in my school, I realized I had to step up and be a voice for people and be a voice for my community, because if I don't do it, if other people don't do it, and like if no one else does it, then there's no one else. There's no one who's going to step up and make that choice and make those decisions. And so I felt like I had to step up and be a voice for all those people.
So for me, SLA is a magnet public school in the school district of Philadelphia. And what made me say is do it is I had nothing to lose, to be honest. So I had nothing to lose. I did this my sophomore year. The worst someone can tell me is no. I've heard that 1,000,001 times. But also I have two amazing nephews who are 6 and 7 who I refuse to allow to go through the same system. So I refuse to allow them not to have a Black male educator in front of them in their K through 12 journey. And also what made me do it is I already had a seat at the table. So I had the ear of the top innovative principal in the district. I had the ear of the superintendent. I had the ear. So it's kind of, we talk about having a seat at the table. What do you do with that seat at the table? And what I did at the seat at the table as well, I'm going to bring up the topic and then I'm going to launch a nonprofit. So when you say no, I'm going to find money, which is, I beg very often for money for the nonprofit. So I'm going to figure out how to get money to incentivize you to bring this to the forefront of the conversation. So what made me do it is my nephews, but also the seat at the table and how was I being a true activist and advocate if I wasn't using that seat.
Great. So each of you has hit on this a little bit, but we wanted to think a little more about, so sometimes when we look at challenges, the first thing we see are all the problems, right? But what did you also see as assets in your space, as resources, on things you could build on, and how did you use those to strengthen the actions that you decided to take?
Well, we all have mentors, right? And I think you choose where you want to spend your time and you decide what you want to do with your time. And I come from a family where both parents were very social justice they weren't activists, but helping a lot of immigrants and doing a lot. And my mom worked with disabled children, and my dad set up a volunteer program for immigrants coming into the country. And I think you just figure out where you're going to spend your time, because the easy way would have been for me to just make more money, just teach my classes, teach overloads, teach summer schools, and make more money, right? That would be the easy thing I could do in life. But it felt like, okay, I've got money with my husband working and me working, and we can raise our children. So what can I give back to the community? And I really thought about where can I fit in? And then, once you get a passion and once you find out that you're not alone, so meeting other people with that passion, it keeps fueling itself. And one of the things that was really strong for me was the book that Sue and I authored. At our college alone, since it became an OER, we've now got documented resources of it saving, the last one was two and a half years ago, we checked, of over $3 million for students in purchasing textbooks. And that's just one course, Introductory to Statistics, which a lot of community college students take, but it's just one. And I think that's more than the financial aid. They're not going to give bookstore vouchers that go back to the commercial publishers for $3 million. So let me see how I can now do this ripple effect of training other faculty. So having other faculty choose or adopt, or how I could help to promote this, because it's helping my students so much, but that's great. That's one class. Let's try to get more in with their other classes. So now I'm really focused on, let's get students through their undergraduate GE path, and let's get faculty trained, not for everybody to write, because at this point, at least for lower division higher ed, there's a lot out there. There are certain courses that don't have much, but there's a lot out there. How can we get faculty into the mode of that choosing what book is best is actually subjective? And the other part that I really hear a lot is, how on earth could you have put a Creative Commons attribution license on your work? What if somebody else takes it and makes money off of it? And I never did share alike. I never did non-commercial. It was right at the beginning. I want the Creative Commons attribution because I want innovation to come from using that. And I want corporations who know how to, for example, Apple took it and it made its first iBook out of, that was again another guinea pig / prototype where you can use your finger and highlight. And students could buy it for $4.99, the access for this. I can't do that. I don't know how to program an Apple, and even though I live walking distance to it, there's no fairy dust that comes and blesses me on that. But what I felt is, it's always there for free. Students are smart. They're not gonna say, oh, you know, here's this book for free. I Google it, it comes up, the top one's the free version. Gee, I think I'm gonna go pay $250 to get a commercial version. What I want is I want the innovations. And the reason I want the innovations is I believe that students have different ways of learning. And for some people, they want a hard copy of the book. Well, at $25, that's a lot less than $250. And doing your finger, if that helps you, over the iPad version, if having an online learning system helps, these are all innovations that I can't do and the other companies could do, which eventually helps the learning of my students. So that's how I kept going, is what would make this better? What would make this better? And to try to get away from the detractors of, no way would I share, because of course, all these people are so brilliant, they never got anything from anybody else, right? No way would I share, to how do you know yours is best? And I had to really come up with how I was going to approach both of those.
So I have a question. We're hearing, we heard a lot about the initial challenge or the barrier that really kind of brought that full front into your vision of wanting to change it, and how some of the examples of how you did. I would like to just hear about, in your process and your whole design processes of what you've been doing, I'd like to hear a story or two about an actual failure, like what didn't work, and more than just hearing all the details of the story, I kind of want to hear a little bit too about what it felt like.
Well, actually, so Honors for All started last year for the 9th graders when I was in 10th grade, and Miss Martin, my principal, got the statistics back, and she was hoping like everyone did well. Like there was a new honors course implemented, and she's like, everyone's going to do well, everyone's great. And she looked at the statistics, and everyone's GPA went down. Like there was a drop, and she was devastated. And of course, when she brought it up in our diversity task force meeting, I was like, that's it. Like Honors for All doesn't work, and no one's succeeding. Like it's dead in the water. All those people who were telling her it's wrong, it's bad, it's not going to help, were right. And that's like horrible to think that like trying to promote diversity and equity in schools doesn't work. Like that couldn't possibly be true. And so that was a major failure that she saw. But she took that as an opportunity and told us as an opportunity to grow from that. The reason that everyone went down, like everyone's GPA went down, was because it was a new course and now everyone was challenged. So she's hoping that it will, this year, and that everyone's GPA will steadily grow up because everyone is now challenged. Everyone's at the baseline. Everyone's where no one has a leg up. Everyone's there, and so hopefully it will grow. There was that first challenge, that first piece of information statistics, horrible, but hopefully it will grow up, and that's exactly what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to rise up, and everyone's supposed to have that opportunity.
So I'm praying my GPA does that after this year as well. So something that a lot of people don't really know is that my co-founder and I first launched the nonprofit the tail end of my freshman year. And it was called Education Matters or hashtag EDU Matters. This is when I first learned Twitter. So I'm like, oh, we're going to throw a hashtag on this. And we started Googling, and he was like, Tamir, let's make this logo. And we paid money for a logo. I was saving lunch money. I used to get $6 a day. So him and I are just stacking money, doing bake sales in school. And then we were like, well, let's just Google Education Matters on the trade site or the brand site to see if you can use this as a brand. And it was like, oh, nope, you can't do this. What are you doing with your life? And that feeling was one like, oh, you just failed completely. And that I had an idea of like, well, maybe you aren't supposed to be I call it nonprofit leadership and entrepreneurship as well. So maybe you're not supposed to be an entrepreneur. Maybe you need to figure out another route. Maybe you need to stay in politics in Philly or stay in the classroom and just learn. But that feeling of failure, but also that feeling of like you were on track and then something stopped you. And this isn't anything new that something is stopping you, but this one is a smack in the face because you guys launched an Instagram, a Twitter. You finally told your family that you're taking a step and trying to be a young entrepreneur, and it failed. But we still go through this failure. We had a failure yesterday when we were like, oh, we're not getting this grant that puts us in our next fiscal year. And we are finally stipending our high school students that next fiscal year. Because I volunteered and interned for many organizations that didn't stipend me, and I refused to be part of that. You're not going to do work for free. You need lunch money. You got to get on the bus after 7 o'clock when your transpass run out. So how do we stipend our students? And we didn't get that grant. So having that feeling of, one, you're failing again, but two, you're making empty promises to your team. And the students that are on my team go to Science Leadership Academy in Philadelphia and other schools, but they still live under the poverty line, some of them. So how could this money stop getting them to ask their parents for money? So it's kind of an empty promise that I feel very often when we don't get that grant or we don't get this big partnership or we have to delay an event that gets them publicity because a business owner don't want to give a contract to us finally. So that emptiness and that failure, that's how I usually feel very often, actually.
I think I've just dealt with lots of, maybe not, I don't know if failures is the right word, but just opportunities, I guess, to revise and redo everything and start from scratch over and over again. One of the things that I created was curriculum that required asked students to use Twitter and to get involved in a larger community with social media. And then our state blocked all social media in students or put all of the blame back on the school. So if students were accessing inappropriate material as part of, that was the school's responsibility. So we had to shut that all completely down, which was very devastating, and you just have to start over. And then often there's a ton of pushback from parents and students that want to come to an online school because they want to sit in their room and do worksheets and not really get involved. I deal with that every day. So you just have to, I guess, keep pushing forward like all these people are doing.
Well, thank you. Sarah, that's a great segue into this next question. So, you mentioned getting pushback, and most of the time failure doesn't necessarily feel good. So what is it that you tell yourself in order to keep moving forward?
I'll hit on that one because now I literally write it on my desk in school. My girlfriend told me maybe my second week of college, and once we applied for something and we didn't get it for the nonprofit, but I also was feeling terrible and feel as though college was too challenging and I wasn't supposed to be here. I didn't fit in here. I go to a primarily white institution and with 18 black males in my graduating class of 2022. So I know the feeling. But no one can tilt your crown. Only you can do that. So that crown you wear on your head, everyone wears that crown. No one can tilt it. No one can knock it off. Only you can do that. Someone can shake it, but how do you stand back up tall and make sure that you continue to push forward and keep doing your life mission? So keep your crown on and keep going and don't allow anyone to knock it.
it's just that what we're doing is way more important than just like me or you. It's important for the next generation, important for kids who are behind me, the kids I know in middle school who are having the same problems, same struggles. It's way more important than me and my senior year and then me going off to college. It's way more important than that. And it's more vital to the kids who are coming next behind me, those 10th graders, 9th grade freshmen, all the way back, even kids who are in kindergarten. It's way more important than just my personal experience. It's for all their education, for all their experiences. It's important for them and that for the future.
Thank you. I have one more question just to kind of wrap up this part of the panel. I would just love to hear, just again, kind of briefly from each of you now. I want to hear a sort of a definition of what it means to have access. So just from your story, from your vantage point, from your point of view, we've been talking about exploring barriers to inclusive access. And since we're about to go and do some design work here, I would just love to hear a definition, your definition based on your experience of what it means to have inclusive access.
I think for me, I think our greatest asset at our school is the teachers themselves. And we were just talking about this with our colleagues, is the teachers are that open educational resource. So I guess my definition is to have access to a quality education, you need a mentor to get there. It's there. There are all these open resources that are free that you can get, but someone needs to show you the way. And I think those are our teachers at our school.
I'll sort of do it on a few different branches. I was talking with my students often, and I'm not in the classroom anymore, but when I was, about what it means that the book is free and having them do some formative evaluations. And one student said, by having this book for free, it just means for once I don't have to feel poor in the class. Just for once, like one class, she comes in, it was a she, because she eventually told me, she gave me it was anonymous, everything was anonymous. And it was when I was still in this insecurity of, am I harming my students with an OER when maybe it's not the best book out there, and had challenges, but she said, I don't feel poor. I know I can come into this class and for 50 minutes, like nobody's looking around me as the poor kid. Let's help her out. She's the poor kid. She doesn't have the book. So that's one part. The other part is I've been very strong on my whole life on support with people with various disabilities, whether it's learning disabilities, blind, deaf, or whatever. And by having the book be WCAG 2.0 compliant, having Bookshare, which is a nonprofit up by in California, but it's national, which does the reading of the books. You can get the audio books. It's very difficult in math and statistics. It's so much formulas, and to be able to have it made correctly, I feel really blessed that Rice University chose this as their prototype. I mean, look at me, I'm a community college math teacher. And to have a university like Rice say, we want your book to be our prototype poster book, and to have it now used at so many places, 600, 700 universities and colleges and AP classes. What that means is, for a moment, students can come in and they've not just safe because I try to be welcoming, or whether I'm in my online class, but be safe because nobody's looking at them. And that was, my father was always the scholarship kid through high school, college, then he did the GI Bill after the military, and he said he always knew. And even though he's white, they still knew, oh, he was the poor kid. Let's help out the poor kid. And I think this is an opportunity that the students come in, and when she said that, like, I just started crying after I read it, and then she came up and told me, because she had never felt that way in her classes. She was always like looking over to see who notes that she's writing on the back of reused paper, for example, that to do her notes. So that was an important thing.
So mine's is kind of weird, I will say. Mine's is kind of I equity, kind of. When I think of equity, I think of schools that's supposed to make efficient, questioning, unique, independent, talented, youthful students and community leaders in the future. So when we think about access, are we giving students the opportunity to be efficient, questioning, unique, independent, talented, and youthful, and that are okay with questioning systems, and for all the educators, even okay with questioning you in your own classroom?
I think for my situation, access is the removal of stigma that every child, every student is waiting to have knowledge filled, like have a teacher fill them with knowledge and have that access to that knowledge. It's, not the color of their skin, but the content of their character.
All right, I think that was actually a pretty brilliant place to close right there. And as we think about what does it mean, what is our definition for access and the removal of stigma, the ability to question, and we're about to segue into this next segment of the design experience. And so we just wanted to, first of all, thank you, each of you, one more time